Good evening. My name is William Kvetchy. I am the Research and Policy Coordinator for King County Elections, and I'm here today to talk to everyone about how to get involved just very generally in politics and or in government. So to start with, just a bit about King County Elections. We are the department that runs elections for all the jurisdictions within King County. So we're the ones that you register to vote with. We're the ones who make and send the ballots to everybody. We're the ones you send the ballots back to when you vote, and we're the ones who count all the ballots up and give the results to everybody. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. We have about 65 permanent employees that work year-round at King County Elections, and during an election we will bring on up to 500 additional seasonal workers to help us process all of the ballots. My job at King County Elections is Research and Policy Coordinator, so I tend to have two halves to my job. The first half, it is my job to monitor and analyze law changes that are coming related to elections in the state of Washington, to make sure that we're prepared for any change that comes our way, that we understand what's going on, and that we can advocate for changes that are not only best for us, but more importantly, best for our voters, and help give access to the ballot to everyone who needs it. The other part of my job is I'm a special projects manager within King County Elections, which basically just means I do whatever my bosses tell me to do at any given moment. This is not my first job with an elections department. I've been working with elections and in local government for 11 years now, which doesn't feel like it should have been that long, but it has been that long, ever since I graduated college. I knew going into college and coming out of college that I wanted to work in government. There was a really strong attraction to me with the service aspect of it. I wanted to be able to serve my community, to give back, and the idea of helping to run the kind of basic infrastructure that supports our society was very appealing to me. I also had a very, very close example growing up. My mom was a city councilwoman and then the mayor of the city that I grew up in. She was first elected to office when I was 10 years old, and she served all the way through past when I graduated college. And so getting to see her and the work she did in public service and how effectively she served people and how effectively she was able to create positive change was really inspiring for me, and it was something that I wanted to take a hold of. I chose elections specifically. I mean, I didn't really choose elections. Elections kind of chose me. There's a very common story with most people who spend a long time in election administration. You don't go into the job on purpose. You fall into it, and then you fall in love with it. For me, it was, I'm originally from Orange County down in California. I got set up with essentially a networking interview with the director of elections down in Orange County. It wasn't meant to be anything specific. I wasn't looking for anything. It was just kind of a get to know you, find out a little more about the job, get some advice on my own job search kind of a thing. I sat down for the interview, and the first thing he asked me is, "I hear you're looking for an internship?" And I wasn't, but I lied and said yes. And the rest ended up being history. But there's a lot of reasons why I love this job, and I don't plan on ever leaving it. One is, like I said, I liked the ability to kind of serve and help provide support for the basic functions of society, and there is no more basic function of our society than democracy, and making sure that that democracy is actually functioning and everyone who is eligible is actually allowed to vote. There's a really, easy built-in feel-good with that kind of a job. The other thing for me is the logistical aspects of it. There are so many moving pieces and so many different things that go into making an election actually work. One of my old bosses used to say that it's the only project of this scope that has such a small margin of error outside of the military that exists. And that absolutely fascinates me, and getting to not only be a part of that machinery, but in my job specifically being able to help improve it I love doing that. And I am happy to get to. But generally, going on from me, how do people generally get started in politics? And I'm going to walk a fine line here between politics and government. Politics is generally a lot of what we see in the media. It's a lot in campaigns and people running for office to get into elected positions where they can affect change, whereas government is more the act of actually governing, and once you are in a position within the government, working to help better society. Not everyone who works in government is elected or needs to be elected. We will get into that. Neither Kate and I are elected officials, but we are part of government. But talking more politics generally, which, while I don't think it should be, tends to be a little flashier. There are a lot of different ways people can get started in politics. One of the most popular ways is just to volunteer for a campaign. There are a lot of different campaigns for a lot of different offices. We have elections every single year. So every August and every November, there is going to be someone around here running for some office. And trust me, they all need as much help as they can get. So anyone who wants to volunteer for a campaign absolutely can. If you don't have a specific candidate that you want to support, you're not sure what to do, you can always go to one of the local political parties, the Democrats or the Republicans, whichever way you lean, your choice. They should be able to direct you to a campaign in need if you would like to do so. In addition, maybe it's not a specific candidate that you want to support, but a specific issue that you want to support. There are usually plenty of advocacy organizations for any specific issue, so you can go to one of them depending on the issue you want, and they should be able to connect you in to help volunteer. As a generic example, the Washington Bus is an organization that tends to focus on students and youth and young adults and issues that affect them. So that's an organization that you can always go to if you want to support that kind of a thing. You also don't have to jump straight into a campaign. A lot of government offices tend to offer internships or jobs, particularly the state legislature. And the internships in particular tend to be open up to students mostly. So anyone who wants to go into that kind of a thing, that is a good place to look as well. And finally, if you really want to just start getting into politics or finding out what it's like, you can just go watch a government meeting. Pretty much any government meeting is going to be open to the public. Most of them these days are live streamed. I'm going to be perfectly honest, most of them are rather boring. But if you want a sense of what is going on, how government works, how decisions are made, what kind of the stakes are in things, that's a good way to introduce yourself to that kind of a thing. There are also some people who like to just jump straight into running for office. So running for office is always an option. Hi. Running for office is always an option for people who want to get involved and want to jump straight into a position where they can really affect things. There is a lot, frankly, that goes into running for office and managing a campaign. Frankly, too much to get into tonight in the time we have. But just to go over some big things. Again, if you're interested in a campaign and how a campaign works, volunteering for a campaign is really the best way to start out. That's the best way to learn things, boots on the ground, and figure out from the inside how things work. If you also want to learn about running for office, there are a couple places you can go to for resources. The first is our website, the King County Elections website, which is kingcounty.gov/elections. We have a lot of information on our website about how to run for office. We will also offer trainings around and before the time when candidate filing actually happens. If you want to sign up to run for office, you have to file as a candidate. That happens every year in May for the offices that'll be on the ballot later that year. So going up to candidate filing, we will have a lot of workshops available for people to learn how to file for office and how all of that works. The other place to go to for information, and that has trainings as well, is the Public Disclosure Commission, or the PDC. The Public Disclosure Commission is a state-run organization, and they handle a lot of things around campaign finance and how campaigns spend money and things like that. For anyone who runs for office, there's a lot of reporting you have to do for where you are getting money from and how you are spending money. All those filings go to the Public Disclosure Commission, so they have a lot of good information available for people on how to do all of that. Excuse me. So that's a rough overview of the how or where to find information on how. who can run for office is usually another big thing to go through. As far as who can run for office, there are different positions that have different qualifications depending on the position. As an example, to go all the way up to the top, in order to be the President of the United States, you have to be a natural-born U.S. citizen and at least 35 years old. If you want to be a U.S. Senator, you have to be at least 30 years old. And different positions will have different qualifications, but for the vast majority of elected positions, really the only requirement is that you be a registered voter within the jurisdiction that that position represents, which means you need to be a U.S. citizen and you need to be at least 18 years old. For people who start running for office, if they're running for the first time, they usually tend to pick a local position, a city council position, a school board position, things like that. Those tend to be easier to get elected to, and they're local positions, so they're affecting directly the community around you. But there are a lot of examples of people who want to run for the first time, including very young people, who were able to get success in a higher office than that. As an example, this is a picture that's probably familiar to at least some of you. This is Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was elected to her position in Congress at age 29. She had worked on other people's campaigns, so she had volunteered on other people's campaigns to learn the ropes, but this was her first time running for office when she happened to win her position. She's the youngest woman to ever serve in Congress. And going even younger than that, this is a Congressman Maxwell Frost. He was elected to Congress just last year for the first time. He was also his first election after volunteering for advocacy groups and other campaigns. He is currently 26, but he was 25 years old when he first won his position, and he is labeled as the first Gen Z member of Congress. And there are plenty of examples of even younger than this. For example, this is Joe Fitzgibbons. Joe Fitzgibbon is a longtime representative in the Washington State Legislature. He represents West Seattle. He has been in office for a number of years. He's actually currently the Democratic House Majority Leader for the Washington State Legislature. He was first elected to the state legislature in 2010, and he was only 23 years old when he was first elected to office. And then finally, on the left here, you have Jalen Smith, and on the right here, you have Ben Simons. Jalen here is the mayor of the town of Earl in the state of Arkansas, and Ben is the mayor of the town of Yoncalla in Oregon. These two were both elected to be the mayors of their cities when they were 18 years old. So, again, while running for office is by far not the only way you can get involved in politics if you want, it is a way to get involved, and age does not necessarily need to be a barrier if you want to run for office. But again, you don't have to be elected or be involved in politics in order to serve the community. Kate and I both just work in government. We aren't elected officials. And there can be a perception to working in government. The perception tends to be very gray and boring. It's the idea that you were just sitting at a desk processing forms with a lot of people who don't actually want to be there and have to deal with a lot of red tape and bureaucracy for a very low wage. And while I will not comment on the wage, I will say the reality is much different than that perception. Your mileage is going to vary, just like, for example, in a position in tech. A position in tech at one company might be very different to a similar position in tech at another company, just because of the way those two companies operate. And your mileage is also going to vary in that same way from government department to government department, depending on where you work. But the reality is that government work is filled with a lot of bright and energetic people who are very excited about their jobs. And speaking for elections, you could say a lot about what we do. Boring is never one of those things. It's a different challenge every day, and it's a unique thing. And again, it's very rewarding work to get to help society. And there's all sorts of different skills and all sorts of different things needed to happen for government. There are people who are just sitting at desks processing forms. That is important to do. But just speaking for King County as a whole organization, we have park rangers, we have mechanics, we have people who analyze policy, we have people who translate things into different languages. If you can think of it, there is probably a government position that requires that skill. So anyone of any skill set can find a place to come and help. The last thing I want to talk about before I open it up to questions, because I really want to make sure to answer any questions you all have, is education. Is a question I've actually heard quite a bit of. If you want to get involved in politics or you want to get involved in government, is there a specific thing that you need to study or learn in order to be qualified for that? The short answer to that question is no, absolutely not. The common answer to this question people might have might be that you want to go to college and study political science, or you want to go to law school and study law. Those things aren't bad. For example, I have a degree in political science. So I'm not going to say that that was absolutely worthless. But is it necessary to study political science or necessary to study law in order to work in government? Absolutely not. Case in point. I mentioned earlier that my mom was an elected official. She served in office for 12 years, and I might be biased. Not might, I'm biased. She was one of the most effective public servants that I've ever gotten a chance to see. She went to college. She has a degree. It's in microbiology. Which has absolutely nothing to do with running a local government, and yet she was still effective at it. If you go to college and you want to study political science, study political science. That's what I did. I'm not going to knock you for it. But you don't need to do that in order to get involved in your community or to get involved in politics. You really study what you want and what interests you, and that can be applicable. Having diverse perspectives in both politics and government is a very important thing, and a thing we like to strongly emphasize. And a lot of times that comes in the manner of perspectives of different races or of different genders or of different sexual orientations, of different socioeconomic backgrounds, and all those are phenomenal and good things. Different perspectives in academic background, also important. In addition to that, for people who are going into elected positions, a lot of elected officials tend to have to make decisions on very technical topics. And if you have a background in that technical topic, that is only going to be helpful to you in that position. The other really important thing I want to note on this topic, our boss, Julie Wise, the King County Director of Elections, she is an elected official. She's been elected by the county as a whole multiple times into her position. She doesn't have a college degree. And yet she is one of the smartest and most effective public officials that I know. Don't feel like having a degree or having the right degree is a barrier to participation here, because it's not. And with that, I know that was high level and probably a little quick, but I want to make sure to answer any questions you all have. So, does anyone have any questions? Oh, God. So the easiest position to be elected to. So there's a position within the political parties called a precinct committee officer. It's technically not a government position. It is a political party position. But it does appear on the ballot. So the point of it is it's a low-level party officer within just the precinct, which is a small geographic area within the county. And I'm not a member of either political party, so I can't really speak to exactly what it does, but the point is to kind of serve as the party's representative in that area. Like I said, it's not a government position, but technically it is elected. And since that's the smallest stakes one, that's probably technically the easiest one to get elected to. Other than that, it's usually going to be a local government position. The cities and city councils tend to draw maybe a little more attention. Those are going to be easier to get elected to probably than, say, a state representative or a congressperson or something like that. But there's a lot of special purpose districts around the county for things like fire districts. So those will control local, like local fire departments that aren't controlled directly by a city. There are parks districts, there are sewer districts, there are obviously school districts. A lot of those things. Unfortunately, tend to get less attention than a lot of other things, which means they tend to get fewer candidates than other things. And so if you're wondering what's easier to get elected to, those are probably going to be it. Those, again, are also hyper-local, so they're directly related to their community and have direct impact on people's lives. That is an excellent question. So there's a lot of resources out there, and we can direct you to those that will give you a list of who are all your elected officials are, and contact information for them if you just want to contact their offices. They will all have some sort of contact information within the jurisdiction that they serve. And for bigger positions or for bigger jurisdictions, there will also be staff there that support those people that can arrange that for you. Different people will have different meet and greets, particularly when people are running for office. They generally tend to be out in the community a lot more and be more available to people because they're trying to get you to vote for them. And for that, it's just dependent on looking at their campaign schedule and seeing when they have events, being able to go meet them. But you can, I think any of your elected officials you should be able to contact at any point, and at least engage in correspondence, if not arrange a time to go meet with them. And like I said, we at King County Elections have resources available that we can point you to that will give you that contact information. An elected official, and I'm going to go with a very, very basic definition to start here, and this is probably going to be obvious to everybody, but an elected official is a position that the voters of the jurisdiction all collectively choose to be in that position. They tend to serve for a specifically appointed amount of time, or at the very least, after a certain specific amount of time, they have to get reelected in order to maintain the position, and those positions are ultimately accountable directly to the voters. Appointed positions come in many different shapes and flavors, but those are positions that usually tend to be a little more administrative than an elected position. An elected position tends to be a little more, representative or legislative. The idea is that this person is in a position and a position of authority where their job is to represent the constituents of their community, whereas appointed positions usually tend to be more administrative roles, where they're there to serve a specific function of government, where a skill and expertise in a specific area is a little more important than just generally being representative of the community as a whole. It's the difference between electing a congressman and electing a plumber. You don't want the community as a whole to vote for who the plumber is. You want someone who is good at doing plumbing.
Judges are elected.
Yeah, and
that's definitely not a hobby position.
Yeah, and that's for one thing, when I talked about qualifications for running for office, judges you need to be a lawyer in order to do that. So there is, a bar there, but that is a debate about whether those positions actually should be elected or not, that I'm not going to weigh in on in my official capacity here, but reasonable people can disagree on whether that position should actually be elected or not. It depends on the position. It depends on the person. It depends on how good of a job they're doing. But speaking from my experience as the son of an elected official, the reality is it can sometimes be hard to please people. And as an elected official, you have a lot of scrutiny placed on you because you were chosen by the people to serve the people and to make decisions and to think. And that scrutiny isn't, that scrutiny is not a bad thing. There should be scrutiny on these kind of people. The whole point of government is that we as a collective whole have decided to all pool our money into one thing so that this one organization we're all giving our money to in the form of taxes can kind of serve the basic needs of our society. And if they're not using the money we gave them to serve our basic needs very well, we should scrutinize that. But sometimes people can jump to scrutiny over small things, and sometimes they can jump to scrutiny when maybe it's not fully deserved. And I'm not speaking specifically on anything on that. Again, I was the son of an elected official, so I understand the attention that can draw to a person and to their family. So it's one of the things that if you are going to get involved in politics, if you're going to become an elected official and be in that kind of high profile position, you do have to recognize that you're in that kind of limelight and you have that attention placed on you and that scrutiny being placed on you. And sometimes that's going to draw attention that maybe you don't want, or that's going to draw ire that you may not think you deserved. But the point is to serve the public. And the public can judge whether you're serving well enough or not. So the first thing I would do personally is look to see if there are any community organizations that are already active in that kind of a space. So there's already an infrastructure there with resources and other volunteers that you can pull from to help with that. This sounds like it's probably would be looking to put like a ballot measure on the ballot to change the law.
I don't know. I'm so far.
Okay, it's fine. So there are, if you want to change the law around something, there tends to be two paths. Path number one is you get the state legislature to change the law in a certain way. Path number two is that you put a ballot measure on the ballot to get people to vote in a law change. So you can go through the elected officials or you can go through the voters as a whole on a particular thing. To your question earlier about being able to contact your elected officials, contacting the state legislative folks that represent you is a very good place to start. If you have an idea for a specific change, you can talk through that with them, see if they're interested in it, see what they think, what they think the chances are of that. If you want to go down the path of putting something on the ballot and putting that through, you would probably want to start by talking with the Secretary of State's office. They are the ones that mechanically will facilitate how you go about putting something on the ballot. What that looks like in a broad concept is there's a lot of paperwork you have to file around getting the law change set. And then after that, it's a petition. So you'd be going around and you'd have to get a number of signatures from registered voters saying, yes, I agree with this. We should put it on the ballot. For a state level ballot measure, to be perfectly frank, that is a lot of signatures.
How many?
That is a number that I would have to look up, but we are talking bare minimum hundreds of thousands.
Can you do that digitally, or is it just?
I don't believe there is room to do that digitally right now. You'd have to have there. I have seen people go and collect signatures in ways that would kind of work digitally, but people would still need to physically sign a piece of paper, like with a pen. If, for example, you wanted to, I have seen other organizations either mail or email people forms that they can sign, have those people print it out, sign them, and then ship them back to whoever's collecting everything. So that is, in theory, a possibility. But most petition organizations will tend to, those are the people with the clipboards outside of grocery stores and things like that that are asking you to sign something. So they'll go either door to door or to areas where people tend to commonly go by or congregate, and they'll kind of ask people to sign forms that way. The going through the state legislature is probably the much easier path. The caveat there is that you have to convince someone in the state legislature to sponsor your idea, so introduce the idea to the state legislature, and then the state legislature has to vote on it. So if you can convince the state legislature of all that, that's definitely the easiest path forward. The petition path and the ballot measure path is more difficult and there is more work to it, but you're circumventing anyone else except for, convincing other people in the community that this is a good idea. So it's it's more involved, frankly more expensive and more work, but it's a more kind of self-sufficient exercise as opposed to having to convince elected officials of it. That is a very good and very large open-ended question. Look, government does have a reputation of that, and to be perfectly frank, that reputation probably doesn't come out of completely nowhere. Your mileage is going to vary depending on the person. I will speak for King County elections as a whole and say that we try very hard to be proactive about things, particularly when it comes to policy and the changes that we advocate for on behalf of our voters. We tend to try and be ahead of the curve and push the envelope on access. As a case in point, For those of you who do vote now, when you go to return a ballot, if you want to return it by mail, you don't need to put a stamp on that envelope. For any of you who have voted for a little while, you'll remember that that's not something that's happened all the time. That's something that changed a few years ago. It changed a few years ago because we decided to change it. We realized that we would be able to do that. We tested it out to make sure that operationally it wouldn't affect how we operate elections on the back end. It wouldn't cause any issues. So we tried it out in a couple small elections. Turns out it didn't affect anything. We could totally make it work. And so we just decided to change and pay for everyone's ballot or their return for their ballot. And because we changed, the rest of the state decided to change with us. We kind of pulled all of them along in order to make that change. I'm not going to say that, every single government agency and every single person who works for the government, it tries to be as proactive as humanly possible and isn't, reactive and stubborn. But the right people in those positions are doing their best to try and serve. Sometimes they're not aware of a problem until they need to react to it. Sometimes they have so much to do and they are so burdened with the work they do and the limited resources they have that they want to be more proactive and they don't have a choice. But I can only officially speak for King County elections and say that we try and be as proactive as possible in making sure that we are providing good service and that we are serving our voters as best as we can and making sure the system is set up to serve them as best as it can be.
Thank you.
Thank you.